would like to first publicly thank Bob Kraft and the Kraft Group for helping us celebrate Read Across America. And in helping us read across America, he put a book in everybody's hands by Mike Lupica, famous author, who is here to share his stuff with you. So please welcome Mike Lupica.
So here's how I ended up at the Ahern Middle School. I was talking to my friend Stacey James from the Patriots, who works for my old friend Bob Kraft, and Bob Kraft's grandchildren read my book. So I said, you know, we ought to do something up in Massachusetts one of these days. So I wouldn't be here without Mr. Kraft, because I said to him, we need to find the best middle school in the United States of America. I know Mr. Kraft since he owned a tennis team and not a football team, and he so supports what I'm trying to do with my book. So he bought like 500 books, and our publisher sent the rest of the books. So here I am, and today we're going to talk about reading and writing and sports and everything that's mattered to me. But before we start, I have to tell you kind of a sad story. I have to tell you a sad story about when I was your age. Because when I was your age, there was no ESPN. Wait, no, it gets worse. It gets worse. There was no internet. There were no laptops. Messaging. And worse and most tragic of all, there were no video games. So what did I do? What did I do? I read books. And with all the stuff that I just talked about, and you know that that's just the short list of stuff that you guys could do that I couldn't do when I was a boy. With all the stuff that you could be doing, we're exactly the same, because we still like a good story. Because with all that magic and science that I just talked about, and eventually they'll come up with an app where you actually don't even have to do anything. You just send your thought to your friend's head without actually having to do anything. With all that stuff, there's no greater magic than page 1, chapter 1 of a book you really want to read. Because once you open that book, you're stepping into the world of your own imagination and my imagination, and then the trick for me as a writer is the only thing that matters to any writer, which is to get you turning pages to find out what happens next. That's the magic of books. In the whole publishing industry right now, you know what the greatest growth industry part of it is? With young readers. Young readers are reading in greater numbers than ever before. I was a reader who became a writer. And here's the thing about my books, by the way. I have no vampires in my books. I know. I have no werewolves. I have no wizards. Now, I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot. I see how those books sell. So as soon as I can figure out how to put a werewolf at quarterback, I'm going to do it. But until then, I write books about the kids in this gym right now. I write books about kids your age trying to do something great in sports. The magic of my books is about friendship and loyalty and teamwork. Because you know this, I've got 4 children of my own, by the way. I've got 3 sons and a daughter. My daughter pretty much runs our family. On her way to what I believe is her ultimate goal of world domination. I know what it's like for them to try to do something great in sports. And if you read one of my books, has anybody read any of my books so far? Oh, see, I knew I was going to love it. I knew I'd love this school. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you read one of my books, you know that I'm going to ask my main character, whether it's a boy or a girl, to overcome stuff. They're going to get knocked down. And here's the thing about getting knocked down. Anybody in this gym can do it. It requires no talent, no spirit, no heart, no imagination. Anybody in the gym, including me, can be a world champion and get knocked down. But it's how you get back up after you do get knocked down that tells the world all about your talent, your character, your spirit, and your heart. That's what my books are about. I coached all of my children in sports. And I'll tell you something, I used to tell them when they were doing it, I said, someday you're going to give $1 bazillion to go back and have one more Friday night or Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon to be your age and have a game you're playing. But every game I ever coached, I'd gather my team around me before the game started. And I'd say, you see all those adults up in the stands? Your parents and your grandparents and your uncles and your aunts? Every one of them would change places with you in a heartbeat and be 10 or 11 or 12 and 13 and have one more game to play. Because here's the thing about those games, and I'm sure you're all on some kind of team here. I'm telling you, appreciate every one of those Friday nights or Saturday afternoons or Sundays. Because someday they're going to feel like gold. Because you don't know how many of them you're going to have in your life. Some of you will go on to high school sports, and some of you may go on to college sports, and some of you may go on to play professional football. Are there any Patriots fans here? But you don't know how many of those days they're going to be in your life. So I'm telling you, you've got to appreciate them. I write my books in the spirit of those Friday nights and Saturday afternoons and Sunday afternoons. And here's the thing, by the way. I had no plans to write this kind of book for young readers. I was going along and I'm writing books for adults, and I'm writing my newspaper column and doing the other stuff that I do. And then, when my middle son was 12 years old, he got cut from a 7th grade travel basketball team for being too small. Now, they didn't say that's why it was, but he and another boy who had always made the team didn't make it. And he told me that during the tryouts that year, one of the evaluators said, well, we need to get bigger this year. And I said, why? So we match up better with the Golden State Warriors? So anyway, the way they did it in our town is you'd fill out a form when you'd go to the tryouts. And then if you didn't make the team, they'd send you a letter. It was very personal. It was like a Hallmark card. It had everything on it except dear occupant. So, one of the dads called me up, though, and gave me a heads up that this letter was going to come. So I knew now that when my son got off the bus that day, there was going to be this letter on our kitchen table, and for the first time, sports was going to knock him down and try to break his heart, okay? And he gets off the bus, and there it is, and he's heartbroken, but the great thing about the faces I'm seeing in this gym is you guys are extremely resilient. I'm more of a grudge holder. No, I'm not really a grudge holder. Sorry. By the way, if you are going to hold grudges, get your own newspaper column. No, that's not the message we're trying to send here. So anyway, do anybody know who Jeff Van Gundy is? Does the games, the NBA games on television? Well, he's an old friend of mine. So I'm talking to him a couple of days later, and I said, here's what happened to Alex. He said, you know, if this were the movies, you'd take all the kids who got cut, you'd start a team of your own, and you'd win the big game. And I said, I can't. Here's the problem with a good idea. You will find this as you go through your lives. Once a good idea gets into your head, it's almost impossible to get it out. 3 days later, in a moment of sheer parental insanity, I became the owner and general manager, really the Bob Kraft, of a rogue 7th grade boys travel basketball team. Everything I'm going to tell you about this, what happens next, is true because it changed my life, okay? I took all the kids who got cut, I started a team of my own, I hired a coach, I called around to other coaches in the area, I scheduled games, and now I was going to give these kids a chance to have a season that they weren't going to have. I was going to give them a chance to collectively get back up. I made a couple of rookie mistakes. One is when I was so happy to get games that I never asked the other coaches how good their team was. So, in the early part of the season, by the way, you'll see I have the attention span of a hummingbird. Okay. The other boy who got cut was named Connor Donovan. So when I decided to start my own team, I called up his mom and I said, listen, tell Connor not to be depressed. We're going to have a team. We're going to have a season. I've got sponsors. It's going to be great. She said, well, he's going to have to miss some time early in the season because he's in this play. And I said, well, Gail, how much time can you miss being in a school play? She said, no, he's in Our Town on Broadway with Paul Newman. I said, oh, okay, that's a good excuse. Remember when I told you sports can't break your heart? This is for the adults here, for one quick digression. Have anybody seen the movie, Boston movie, The Departed? In the first 10 minutes of that movie, there's an adorable child actor who plays the part that Matt Damon would play later on. That's Connor Donovan. So the next time sports tells you this, it's going to break the kid's heart, he's working with Leonardo DiCaprio, and clearly, I'm still going door to door selling books. Okay. So, the season starts. I haven't asked how good the other team is, and in my memory, every game we're playing early in the season, we're losing 35-3 at halftime. My kids can't get the ball over half court. I'd go home and I'd say to my wife, these kids feel worse now than when they got cut. I said, what, the heartwarming Disney movie that I thought I was writing, when's that going to start? I go to the coach and I said, we have to call this off. This is like a science experiment that's gone horribly and tragically wrong. He said, no. He says, they're getting better. I said, no, they're not getting better. I said, they're actually getting worse. There's 2 kids on the team. I'm not even sure if they're right-handed anymore. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. He was right. These kids got better. And if anybody here who's on a team knows it just happens sometimes, that you come together and a group of kids of different talent levels and love for the game and all this other stuff, you get on the same page and you do something more than maybe you thought you could do. It's the beauty of sports, whether we're talking about a middle school team or all the way up to the Patriots. It happens. And I watched it start to happen with my team. They start to beat teams that had beat them early in the season. And before every game, I tell them the same thing. I say, listen, we're not in any league here. I made this whole thing up. There's no March Madness. There's no postseason tournament. But every game you play, you're playing for the championship of any boy or girl who ever got told by an adult that they weren't good enough in sports. And then they'd go out and win another game. And I can remember the first game they won. Because they'd been so bad early in the season. You ever seen the movie The Bad News Bears? Yeah, we were like much worse than that. If I had compared my team early in the season to the Bad News Bears would say, whoa, you're comparing that team to us? I can remember when they won their first game. And Mr. James knows we've been lucky enough in our careers to see some of the biggest sports events in the world. We were both in University of Phoenix Stadium last year when a kid named Malcolm Butler made the greatest defensive play in the history of the Super Bowl. And that fast, the Patriots went from losing the Super Bowl to winning. And here I am, peeking through the window of a gym in Westport, Connecticut, hoping that these kids will win one game. Because I'm thinking to myself, if we win just one game, then everything we'd all done would have been worth it. But they not only win that game, they keep winning. The last game of the season, they win by 1 point on a free throw with 3 seconds left in front of the biggest crowd they played in front of all year. They run around the gym like they've won the championship of the world. And guess what? Now I got my Hollywood ending. Everything that I hoped would happen had happened. They did pick themselves up. Every single one of these kids, and every team I ever coached, I tell them the same thing. I said, I hope we win some games this year. I do. There's a reason why you keep scoring sports. But if I honestly believe at the end of the season that every one of you players got better, that we had a good year. Every one of those kids got better. And so now the season's over. Season's over. And we have our pizza party, and we give out trophies, and the kids disperse. And this team had done the thing that sports does the best. It had given us all a memory. At the end of the day, sports is in the memory-making business. Like I just referenced Malcolm Butler, okay? You don't need to see a replay of that interception. You don't need to have it on TiVo or on your Patriots highlight film. It's burned into your memory and into your heart and into your imagination. You can see him still. You can see him, can't you, Stacey, stepping in? Making that play. That's the beauty of sports. We'd all made a memory for ourselves. So the kids dispersed, but I can't let go of this season because I knew that I had seen something really great. I had seen all the things that matter to me about sports. So I'm talking to my agent, and an agent's a person who helps you get your book sold. And I said, I saw something great this year. I don't know whether it is a movie or a story about these kids or a novel. She said, you know what? Write an outline for a novel. I wrote a 3-page outline. I faxed it to her about 10 o'clock in the morning. At 1 o'clock, she calls me back, and she said, we have a deal for you to write this book. And it's about a kid who gets cut for being too small, but it's about more than that. Great. I'm a young adult writer, except I have no idea how to write this kind of book. Now, my wife now says, honey, let's face it, you writing from inside the mind of a 12-year-old seems like pretty much a perfect fit, as far as I can tell. She said, it's nice that you can now use your immaturity to help the family. Now, looking at the faces in this gym, I know that when your teachers give you an assignment, even if they give you an extended period to do it, I can tell, just looking at these young faces, that you all go home and finish the assignment that day, don't you? No, you don't. You do exactly what I did with this book. I put off writing it as long as I possibly could. It's the summer. I'd never written a book in the summer. We're out at the beach. My boys are like, whatever ages they are. Their mother knows how old they are. But no, I have 4 children. I can't be expected to know everything. So finally, I get 2 chapters written. I get 20 pages written. And it's a summer night. The boys and I are getting ready, probably to watch a Red Sox game on TV. I give these pages to my wife to read. And she goes off to a different part of the house. She comes back about 45 minutes later, and she's got these pages in her hand. And this is for the adults in the gym. And there's a look on her face that in 30 years of marriage has never, ever, ever, ever meant anything good for me, ever. And then she says, I'd like to speak to you in your office, please. Nothing good has ever happened in there. I said, no, I'm not going in there. Whatever you're going to say in front of the children so there'll be some kind of record of it. I said, boys, put this on your phones. She said, well, by the way, Mrs. Lupica disputes certain elements of the story. But you know what, I'm here and she's back in Connecticut, so we go into the office. She throws these pages down on my writing table. I said, what? She said, this is the best thing you've ever written. Please shut up and finish the book. That's what passes, kids, for a literary pep talk in my marriage. But I still don't know if the story that I'm telling is going to be something that's going to get you guys to keep turning the pages. So I start giving the book to my boys as I'm writing. Now the boys, they're like 10 and 12 and 14 at this point. They would have faked getting abducted by space aliens to get out of their own summer reading. All they wanted to do was eat, sleep, go to the beach, and watch sports. Which, as I say that now, it occurs to me, 10 years later, it's all they still want to do. So I'm giving them these pages to write, and they don't want to be reading anything in the summer, and all of a sudden, every 2 or 3 days, one of them would come up to me and they'd say, Dad, have you finished any new chapters yet? And I said, well, yeah, but I haven't edited them. So they said, we don't care. I've got 3 boys hovering over my printer to find out what was going to happen next. This book comes out in October of 2004. And if you're of a certain age, you might remember that there was a baseball event that year between the Red Sox and the Yankees that some people in this part of the country consider rather memorable. And by the way, before we get back to my book, you guys know what happened with the Red Sox and the Yankees that year? You know? Huh? No, I know, but you're a little older than my focus group here. So, here's what happened if you don't know and if you kind of know. The Yankees are winning 3-0 in the American League Championship Series. They're about to beat the Red Sox again, something they have done for the last 6,000 years. They are 3 outs away from doing this, and the Yankees are bringing in a guy named Mariano Rivera, who's the greatest in the history of the planet at getting those last 3 outs. And here's what happened next. A walk, a pinch runner, a stolen base, and a single up the middle. And the game is tied. Now, if you're the most optimistic Red Sox fan in the world at this point, of which there were like 7, you're not thinking, oh, holy crap, we've got them right where we want them. And if you're the most pessimistic Yankee fan, of which there were none at this point, you're not thinking, oh my God, we're in huge trouble. Except here's what started to happen. The greatest story in the history of baseball. Ortiz hits a home run later in the night, now it's 3-1. And the next night they play an even longer game, and Ortiz knocks in John Damon, and now it's 3-2. And then the next night at Yankee Stadium, a guy named Curt Schilling goes out and pitches on a bloody sock, and now it's 3-3, and they win the series, and they win the World Series for the first time since 1918. But here's the thing. How did that all start? How did that all start? It starts with a walk, a stolen base, and a single up the middle. The biggest stories I've ever covered begin with the smallest moments sometimes. Malcolm Butler was a kid who couldn't even play on a junior college in Mississippi. He wasn't even supposed to be playing that night. But guess what? When they came out of the huddle and he saw the formation, he was smarter than the Seahawks coach, the offensive coordinator, and Russell Wilson, because he knew what they were going to do. Right? Because he and Belichick had talked about this play the day before. And what happens next is the most famous defensive play in the history of the sport. Anybody ever seen the movie Miracle? I was there in Lake Placid for every one of those games in 1980. And I know what you adults are thinking. Wow, he must have been like 7 or 8 years old at the time. The week before the Olympics had started, the Russians beat us like 10-3 at Madison Square Garden, and it could have been 100-3. They were that much better. Only now it's the semifinals of the Olympics, and it's 2-1 at the end of the first period with 10 seconds left. And my friend Michael Eruzione is skating off the ice, and he sees Mark Johnson go streaking behind him, and he actually thought, where the heck's Mark going? Well, where Mark was going was to change sports history. He picked up a bouncing puck, and with 1 second left in the period, he scores. And now the game is 2-2. And it's not quite the night it was supposed to be. The night had changed. I was talking to a great sports philosopher one time, Mike Tyson. And this is when he was still the baddest man on the planet, and he's getting ready to fight this guy, Terrell Biggs, in Atlantic City. And we're sitting with him in his dressing room, and a couple of British writers came in, and they said to Tyson, you know, it sounds like Biggs and his people have a very good plan for you on Saturday night. And Tyson looked at these guys and said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit. The Russians had been hit. The Russian coach, if you saw the movie, got so mad, he took the best goalie in the world out of the game because he thought he could still beat us with anybody. And before long, it's 3-3, and there are exactly 10 minutes left, and Michael Eruzione of East Boston, Massachusetts, puts one past the backup goalie, and that goal stands up. And all this time later, people still think it's the greatest sports event in the history of this country. But how did it change? It changed with a bouncing puck and 1 second left. That's the beauty of sports. You've seen it in games you watch. You've seen it in games you play. The next moment's the one that can change everything. My life as a writer changed because of a letter on my kitchen table telling me my kid got cut from a travel basketball team. This book comes out in 2004. And within 10 days, it's #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It ends up selling 500,000 books and changing my life and bringing me into the world where I go to schools like this and we talk about reading and writing and stories. And the thing was, it didn't have to be basketball. It didn't have to be too small. Kids are, you know this. Kids are constantly being told they're too this or they're that. Even the most well-meaning other Little League coaches that I coached with or against, I was always fascinated that they would get fixed on what kids couldn't do as opposed to what they could do. But how did my life as a writer change? That's millions of books ago. It started with a letter on my kitchen table. And then a guy told me I should take all the kids who got cut and start a team of my own. And I started a team of my own, and it was such an amazing experience that I wrote a book about it, and the book changed my life. I hope everybody in this gym, by the way, gets a chance to live out their dreams the way I've gotten to live out mine. Oh, by the way, you know, before we get to questions, because I want to take some questions, I'm not just here to entertain, I'm here to educate as well. You can tell I'm a serious person, can't you? Yeah. So this is a good time, boys, for us to deal with something that I think is an important subject, and that's the fact that girls are a little smarter and cooler than we are. Okay? I know that we're also smart and cool. The problem is, and you start to discover this in middle school, we just get a couple of steps behind at this point in our lives and spend the rest of our lives trying to catch up. Now, girls, you look at the boys next to you in this gym today, and I know it's going to sound crazy. Someday they're going to have wives. I know you think that's nuts, but they are. So, and when they do, guys, you're going to say to your wife, you know, this crazy writer came to her middle one day, and he tried to tell us that girls are smarter and cooler than boys. At which point, I can almost guarantee you, your wife will say something like, whoa, that writer was really smart, okay? And when she says this, I'm going to give you a phrase that will never hurt you, boys, in your dealings with women for as long as you live, okay? I'm going to give you a phrase that can move mountains. Would you like to hear what it is? You're going to say the following. You're right, dear. Now, listen, guys, I would be remiss if I left here without us practicing that for just 1 second. So girls, you don't need to say anything because you're happy with me. I've already sucked up to you guys. Okay, so on the count of 3, boys, I want you to say, you're right, dear, okay? You know, I often get a little resistance, but you know what? I don't quit. All right, guys, ready? 1, 2, 3. Hey! Did you say you are? What's your name?
Joseph?
This is Joseph. And first of all, give Joseph a round of applause for being. Joseph, looking up at your group up there, I sensed that maybe you weren't buying what I was saying about girls and boys. Is that true? Now, Joseph, was it you who said you're wrong, dear, or did they sell you out up there? They sold you out. Joseph, you don't believe that girls are smarter and cooler. They're equal. That's a great answer. We're going to take questions in just a second, okay? But I want to just tell you one last thing about these books that I wrote. When I was a little boy, For all the fun we had at the start of this talk, I used to go sit in the stacks of the library in upstate New York where I grew up. And I would read books and dream about being a writer someday. And I started writing for my school paper, and then I went to Boston College, and I was writing for 3 school papers and working nights at the Globe. But I've gotten a chance to live out my dreams and tell my stories. And again, there are no tricks in these stories. There are no shortcuts in these stories. When I talk about friendship and teamwork and loyalty, I mean it. You know that once you leave you want to be a good child or a good brother or sister. You want to be a good student, but you know that in your lives, there's nothing more important than being thought of as a good friend or being able to count on your friends. Those are what my books are about. Again, if you're not a good friend or a good teammate, you're not going to do very well in one of my books. I have the greatest job in the world when I write these stories because for 250 pages or 300 pages or whatever it is, I get to make the world and sports come out the way I want it to. I reward the good guys. I want good guys to win the day. These aren't fairy tales. Every one of you in this gym has a novel in you. If I ask you a question about the best day you ever had in sports, or the worst day you ever had in sports, or the best game you ever saw, or the best game you ever played, the minute you told me that story, I'd start thinking of it as a novel. I write stories about the boys and the girls in this gym. And I will make you one promise. If you keep reading, and especially if you keep reading my books, I'll keep writing them. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, now listen. I've done a lot of talking here. We're going to pass the microphone around. We'll try to we've got plenty of time for questions. We're going to try to get questions. All right, here's what we're going to do. If you have a question, I'm going to give you the mic. I know everybody else will give you a chance to be heard, and we'll move the mic around as much as we can. Okay. Tell me your name.
My name's Adina.
Go ahead.
My name's Adina.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Do I ask a question?
Yes.
When did you start writing?
Well, the question is, when did I start writing? I actually started writing when I was like 10 years old. I'd write these adventure stories with me as the main character. I'd write, all I've ever wanted to do is be a writer. In fact, it's why I always encourage you to buy my books, because I really have no other skills. So, if the book writing thing goes south, I have very little to fall back on, okay? But I always wanted to write, and I've been doing it for most of my life. And it's been a hoot. Really.
Okay, my name's Jake. May you please sign my book?
Huh?
May you please sign my book?
All right, who's got a question over here? And hand it back to that boy, okay? Is that mic on? Hello? Just go. Yeah, they'll fix it. You just tell me what your question is. The question is, if I hadn't been lucky enough to become a professional writer and write books and newspaper columns, what would I have wanted to be? I would have wanted to be, I would have joined the ranks of what I think are the great heroes of American life, which are teachers. Josh's question is, how many books have I written? I've written 31 books, and the last 20 have been books for young readers. The question is, how many baseball books have I written? I think I've written about 8 baseball books. I have. The question is, what is my favorite sport? And I have to tell you, I love baseball and football. Okay, I do. I love being with my kids at a game at Fenway Park. I love watching football on television. But here's the thing about me and sports. I was saying this to a friend of mine the other day. Whether I know a lot about the sport or not, and I turn it on, and somebody's doing something at a high level and they're keeping score, I'll watch that game in the back, in the blue. The question is, and I get this question in almost every school I go to, what's my favorite book? And I have to tell you, I will always have a special place in my heart for Travel Team. That was the first one. That was based on what happened to my son. I love this book that we said here called The Extra Yard, because I asked the boy Teddy, who's the main character, to overcome a lot. In fact, I was just telling everybody when I was walking in, my favorite book right now is the book that comes out in September. It's called Last Man Out. It's set in Brighton, Massachusetts. It's about the son of a fireman and a Patriots fan, and maybe I'll come back through this area in the fall and talk about that. Who's got a question? My children, my boys are in their 20s. My daughter is 17 years old and a junior in high school. To you? Did you guys all see that? You know what? I think the Russian judge gave you a bad score. My favorite color is blue. Hello. Soccer? I have written a book called Soccer. It's called Shootout. You can find it either at a bookstore or on Amazon. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite books. Now, am I intelligent? Yeah. All right, I'm going to sign this. I'm sorry I can't sign all the books, but I'm going to sign yours. Abby? Abby? All right, go ahead. No. And I'll tell you what. Don't take this the wrong way. I don't want to. The question is, did I go to college? Yes, I went to Boston College. My 3 sons all went to Boston College. My sister went to Boston College. I like it there. The question is, who was my favorite athlete growing up? And it's, you know, these questions are always interesting because what you find out if you do what I do for a living is how fast the treadmill keeps going. And so I can talk about Willie Mays, and you don't know who Willie Mays is, and I can talk about Michael Jordan, and even people are starting to figure out that Michael Jordan is disappearing. And the greatest athlete I ever covered was Michael Jordan. The greatest person I ever met in sports was the late tennis player Arthur Ashe, who was one of the great figures our country ever produced. All right, let's take a few more. Can I pass up a number 12? I don't think so. All right. These will be our last 2 questions. I don't want to put any pressure on either one of you. But who knows when I'll be around to answer questions and everything. So don't think about that, okay? Who would like to go first? Your name, please. Hey, Jason, what's your question? Do I support Trump? Well, let me ask you a question. What are the odds of me getting too political? political questions. I'm going to give you a longer answer than you deserve. I've known Mr. Trump for a long time. And I like him as a person, but I cannot subscribe to some of his beliefs about me. And the question is whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican. What's your name? Madison? I'm the most independent person you will ever meet. Thank you so much.